There are more than 1 million amateur fishermen in New South Wales, and if Agriculture Minister Ian Armstrong is fishing for a fight, the anglers have taken the bait.
What do you think about these new laws?
Oh, they stink.
500 fishermen met last night at West Leagues Club to oppose the new controls. The scheme, announced last month, stipulates bag limits on more than 25 common types of fish, including 10 for snapper, 20 for bream, 5 kingfish and 20 blue swimmer crabs. Take a case in point. If a fisherman takes a boat to sea for 1 or 2 or even 3 days and catches, say, 6 kingfish and is caught in possession on the water's edge, he's breaking the law and could face fines of up to $5,000.
I wonder how long it'll be before they clamp leg irons on us, deport us to Victoria.
The government says the new rules are to stop what they call shemateurism, amateur fishermen who sell their catch on the black market. The fishermen say the illegal trading will probably continue, and meanwhile legitimate anglers will be missing out. Newcastle Anglers Association Chairman Barry DeFlon says he's cancelled a holiday to Southwest Rocks. He says it's just not worth the trip.
I can bring home a total of 20 bream for 14 days, not 20 bream a day. And that's going to make the trip useless. It's not worthwhile making the venture.
The legislation is set to become force from July 1. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The contract to supply 40 trains is worth an estimated 100 million Australian dollars. Gunninan says the Tangara's ready-made specifications give it the inside running. If successful, the company's Newcastle plant would have to be expanded and as many as 100 jobs would be created.
The Air Force Base is the scene of hectic but ordered activity as personnel begin Stage 1 of Exercise Pitch Black. In accordance with Australia's defence strategy, Williamtown's airmen and women have to be ready to move north at short notice, and today they were put to the test. Exercise Pitch Black involves a simulated attack on our northern shores. The week-long war game between enemy Orange forces and the Blues includes US and Singaporean aircraft, and in air defence terms is bigger than Kangaroo 89. But just getting there is at least half the battle.
A successful military operations often depends more on logistics than it does on the performance of frontline combat units. We do it regularly, yearly on a pre-planned basis so that we're then capable of going at short notice if a real situation does arrive.
Over the weekend, 700 personnel and tons of equipment will share cramped quarters on 14 flights of Hercules cargo carriers on a 5-hour trip to Darwin. For many, it means leaving families over the school holiday period, but the exercise has an attraction all of its own.
It gives a real purpose to the business that we conduct. I think the The maintenance folks in particular like to get out, have a week of really intense activity, work hard and get a real sense of satisfaction from their achievements.
The participants needed little incentive to leave chilly, windswept Williamtown for Darwin, currently sweltering in a tropical 30 degrees.
Yeah, it's pretty cold here, so you got to get out there. Good drinking weather. Really good. Yeah, good trip.
Sounds good. A lot better than here.
Once the ground crews have settled in, the base's fighter squadrons will follow. The F-18 Hornets depart on Monday morning, leaving an unfamiliar quiet to settle over Williamtown. The absence of aircraft couldn't come at a better time for the base, where urgent repairs to the runway surface will begin as the last fighter scrambles. Resealing of the runway was last carried out in 1975 and is long overdue. It's estimated the locally awarded contract will cost the RAAF about $2 million. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
For the next 3 weeks, the events of and leading to December 28, 1989 will be played out in Newcastle Coroner's Court. It's a historic hearing, the first in Australia to investigate earthquake-related fatalities. State Coroner Kevin Waller was here the day after the quake. Today he presided at the inquiry into 12, possibly 13 deaths. Until now, the death toll has not included a 63-year-old woman who collapsed at the time of the quake, later dying from a brain hemorrhage. The link between her death and the earthquake will be considered later in the hearing. In his opening statements, Mr Waller said the inquest will put the full facts surrounding the earthquake on public record. He said it will explain to the people of New South Wales and Newcastle in particular why the earthquake struck and the likelihood of recurrence. The coroner said the hearing may touch upon other matters, citing a document critical of some rescue services, but he made it clear his role would not be to referee disputes arising out of inter-service rivalries or demarcation issues. Canberra seismologist Kevin McHugh answered a series of questions raised by Mr Waller. The court heard poor foundation materials underlying the central business district and Hamilton would have amplified the ground movement up to 4 times above surrounding suburbs. He said there's no doubt other earthquakes will occur near Newcastle in the future, estimating a 65% chance of a quake registering 6 on the Richter scale in the next 55 years. Evidence was heard this afternoon from police officers first on the scene at Beaumont Street, Hamilton. Detective Sergeant Jim Young told how Cecil Robert Abbott and Cyril Keith McMahon died when shop awnings fell. Dulcie Blim also fell victim to an awning. She later died at Royal Newcastle Hospital. Amid the tragedy, there was a tale of survival. A statement tendered to the court told how toddler PJ Rowe was pulled from the rubble of Beaumont Street. His mother, Jacqueline Rowe, told police how all she could see of her son was his little leg sticking out from under the bricks and rubble. He was freed by 4 or 5 young guys, she said. Ms Rowe said both she and her son were nervous and jumpy since the accident. The inquest continues tomorrow with engineering evidence relating to the Beaumont Street deaths. Leslie Robinson for NBN News.
What's claimed to be the biggest coal loading operation in the world was born on the 4th of July with a formal announcement by Port Waratah Coal Services manager David Boyd. Speaking on behalf of shareholders, he said the merger with Kooragang Coal Loader is a $500 million deal worth celebrating.
This will allow us to handle more tonnes, export more tonnes. That's more revenue for the state and the nation, more jobs for people in the future, and augurs well for Newcastle.
Until now, coal producers and customers wore the costs as the two loaders needlessly duplicated services. BHP's decision to sell out of its Hunter coal operations gave the industry control of the Kooragang coal loader, but the government still owned a 20% share in the form of MSB-employed wharf labour. Transport Minister Bruce Baird was only too happy to sell that service to private enterprise in the name of microeconomic reform. It was then up to the unions to agree to members moving from state and federal government awards to private enterprise. After 3 months of talks with the New South Wales Industrial Commission, the dozen waterfront unions consented.
Quite obviously the Port of Newcastle is fundamental to the regional economy, and we see efficient port operation as the basis for future manufacturing expansion, and as a consequence of that, jobs at the end of the day are our prime concern.
The merger is already paying off. From July the 1st, coal loading costs dropped by 15 cents a tonne, a saving to the Hunter coal industry of $5 million a year. Overseas shareholders approve of the merger and predict export growth.
In the future, we forecast that the demand for steaming coal will be much greater than that now.
The announcement comes when coal sales are enjoying an upswing after a disappointing start to the year. Coal exports to the end of June were 18% better than for the same period last year. The port is expecting to shift 33 million tonnes of coal this year. The new company has the design capacity to export more than double that amount, giving it expansion opportunities well into the next century. Tom Hilston, NBN News. Delegates from the Hunter Regional Association of Councils confronted two transport issues for the region. Mr Chenery advised them on the outlook for a regional airport, while President of the Interstate Commission Ted Butcher covered progress on the introduction of a user pay system for road transport. Mr Chenery told the audience Badgerys Creek is earmarked for a $400 million airport handling domestic air services and ultimately international traffic. However, he believes the decision may ultimately work out for the Hunter.
I think Badgerys Creek is just far too far away and too expensive to be considered as anything viable in the next 15 years. And the point we're making is Williamtown is there, it's up and running. In fact, there are commercial arrangements already in place, and what we want to do is use it now, not wait for the future.
In past months, operators like Queensland Pacific Airlines have linked Newcastle to Brisbane and other northern destinations. Oxley Airlines is now offering a service linking Newcastle to Melbourne, and another airline is waiting in the wings with plans for a Newcastle-Canberra run. Mr Chenery says the government may eventually have to reconsider its airport policy in the face of economic reality, choosing a runway which already exists at Williamtown rather than investing in a distant and uncertain future.
In money terms from governments, but commercially it's up and running from the point of view that Queensland Pacific already flies direct to Brisbane and Coolangatta, and we have other major airlines.
The opening of the treatment works at Charmhaven marks the end of a project spanning 2 decades. It's designed to meet the region's growth well into the future. However, the system which pumps treated water directly into the ocean had a controversial birth.
There was a lot of mistrust. A lot of people thought we were going to have another Bondi outfall, and they were most alarmed about it. But as you can see here, we treat the sewage and give it its treatment so that it's quite clear.
While Murray told council and public works officials that the project not only won an environmental court battle, but was heartily endorsed. He said comparisons with Sydney's effluent nightmare justify the project.
When you look a little bit further south, that there is indeed a very strong congratulations to go out to the department and to the councils for their far-sightedness.
With the unveiling of a plaque, the treatment works sprang to life. This is the biggest of 5 similar systems. Designed to meet present demands, it can be expanded to cope with 100 times the current regional development. Ever mindful of tourism, Wyong Shire actively promotes the sewerage scheme, inviting visitors to see for themselves that it is delivering pure water back into the ocean. It's an indication of just how sensitive an environmental issue sewage treatment has become that Wyong Council has moved its entire water testing facilities for the Shire to this site. Researchers monitor water quality at every stage, from Wyong's mountain streams through reservoirs to the sewers. This was the most appropriate location for the laboratory, at the point where the water is returned to the natural system. Wyong Shire's progress is equally important to the Hunter. Similar sewage treatment works are under construction or planned throughout the valley.
The number of smaller plants we've already built that follow this type of process, such as at Minmire and up at Branxton, and in Lake Macquarie, the Toronto plant and the other plants in Prospect, say at Dora Creek and so on, are very likely to use the same process.
Miners at Newcastle Colliery assembled at a no-frills occasion to see the money raised through the United Mineworkers Federation handed to Hunter Area Health Service Executive Owen James. The donation will pay for equipment at casualty sections in hospitals at Newcastle, Wallsend, Muswellbrook, Cessnock and Singleton, hospitals where miners have been treated and are likely to be in the future. The donation isn't exceptional. Miners have a proud record of supporting hospitals, in some cases even funding their creation.
Miners have got a 90-year-old tradition of building and providing the maintenance of the district's hospitals, and this $150,000 commitment to the Newcastle Hunter Valley Hospital is a continuation of that program.
It was a parade of the who's who of the Winfield Cup at Harker Oval today, with Robbie McCormick and Steve Fulmer from the Knights and Penrith sideline front rower Peter Tunks casting an eagle eye over proceedings. South scored first with lock John Crooks. He finished off good lead-up work by Brett Mackay and Paul Hill. 20 minutes later, Crooks was in again. Fullback David John hoisted the ball high, and Crooks flew for a brilliant take and swivelled and sprinted the 12 metres to give South a 14-0 lead, and West were in strife. But like the leaders they are, and fired by 5/8 Neil Baker, they hit back with a try to Rod Muller, who stepped off his left to score. And then just before half-time, Baker delayed his pass beautifully for fullback Peter Atkins, who offloaded to Jason Shimer, and he touched down in the corner. And the Rosellas finally got their nose in front after the break, when Baker once again gave a super ball to Craig Dodd, and he crashed over to score. Enter captain Mal Graham, who scored 2 tries in the space of a couple of minutes. The first after backing up a doubtful pass from Shimer. And then West switched play to the blind side, with Graham able to stroll through some paper-thin defence to put the issue beyond doubt. At Carl Oval last night, Lakes United kept the pressure on leaders Western Suburbs with a 22-12 win over Curry, scoring 3 tries in 7 minutes late in the match to snare victory. Curry scored a good try in the first half when Messenger chipped over the top. Gary Bray got a shocking bounce and Ladder dived on the ball to score. Lakes hit back with Hibbard doing the Curry defence all ends up. He regathered and slipped a super pass to Glanville. On to Darren Butler, and Lakes led at the break 8-6.
Brigades from Toronto, Bullaroo and Teralba answered a major alert soon after 6 o'clock last night at the C.A. Brown pensioner units. Investigators believe 87-year-old Daisy Forbes had been working on her sewing machine when a spark ignited the inferno.
I think it was an electrical short, actually, that's caught the same machine alight and then flared to other materials in the room.
Neighbour Pat Cagney heard a bang and rushed to the unit to find a bundle of clothing well alight.
I thought I'd grab the clothes and throw them out. When I lifted the clothes up, it sort of blew up. In seconds, everything was fine.
The two pensioners backed out the door and alerted the fire brigade. The blaze gutted the unit, turning the bedroom mattress into ash and baking bathroom tiles pitch black. Neighbours evacuated their units and looked on helplessly. It's believed Mrs Forbes lost all her possessions in the fire. She was taken distressed but otherwise unharmed to her daughter's home. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The National Pole Hereford show is the biggest event on the junior calendar. This weekend, 230 up-and-coming heifer handlers gathered at Lochinvar. Most of them have been preparing for this event for the past month and have spent every waking hour getting to know and understand their heifer. This morning the cattle were scrubbed, shampooed, blow-dried, combed and sprayed. Once in the ring though, the heifer has a mind of its own. But with the title of Grand Junior Champion at stake, these youngsters know how to take control. This year's junior winner was Andrew Scaines of Kundawindi on the Queensland border, leading Merriwa Cupid. The prize heifer, which also took out Grand Champion, was decorated by the state's Governor-designate Rear Admiral Peter Sinclair. For the state's governor-to-be, today was a learning experience. Although he owns his own breeding property near Hawk's Nest, his efforts in coordinating the Nyngan flood relief and his new high-profile job have taken him away from the farm.
Well, I think it's excellent, but I have to say that, I mean, yes, I'm a breeder, but I'm very low on the learning curve, so I'm here to, as much to learn myself as to participate in the event.
So are you picking up a few hints from the kids that are parading this morning?
Oh, yes. In the main, I think they know more about it than I do, but I'm very impressed.
With the mercury battling to top the 10-degree mark, it was definitely a fun run for those with a warped sense of humour. Standing around in the biting westerly wind, clad in only shorts and a singlet, was definitely not on, so a brisk pace was maintained during the early stages in a bid to keep the blood circulating. For the runners, the most telling stretch was the climb through King Edward Park, with some choosing to walk. For those at the front, though, there was no time to admire the view. Merryweather was in sight. With the icy wind whipping the leaders on and the warmth of the Surf Club beckoning, the 8.5 kilometres was covered in a matter of minutes.
Kenneth. Right.